Hi, I'm SD Schwartz, and this is my thesis, Cautiously Pessimistic. When I started working on this project, or considering what I wanted to work on for a year, I encountered a quote in a pretty unconventional place, and when I saw it, I thought, yes, that is what I need to spend a year working on and writing about. Just because everyone expects something from you does not mean it's going to happen. I find that this disappointment that comes with missing expectations is pretty universal and does not matter what background you come from. Missing the expectations of others, but even more than that, missing the expectations of yourself kind of feels like this. For me, as an observant Orthodox Jew, this expectation was around marriage. I hoped and honestly expected to be married and start a family of my own like 5 years ago, kind of like my siblings and a lot of my friends did. This is the piano of fame that is in my parents' house. It's where we keep all of the wedding pictures. That's all 5 of my siblings, happily, I hope, married. And above the piano is my artwork, casting a shadow upon all of them. It's really, really not the same. So I took this, the most unbearable and insufferable and stressful part of my life, and I turned it into art. My art is an illustrated novel. My characters are thoughtful and introspective, and because most of the action in the story takes place in their heads, I gave them prose writing to explore their thoughts, lest it be an 80-page comic book of people sitting across a table and looking at each other. I included drawings to establish atmosphere and pacing, and also because drawings are really fun. This is a story about 2 young adults trying to find a partner while navigating the rigid dating culture of the Orthodox community. I find that when Jews are represented in fiction, it is often done so in a way that I, as an Orthodox Jew, almost never identify with or barely even recognize. This story shows Orthodox Jews in an honest, insightful way where the characters go to shul or synagogue, wear kippahs, that's the round thing that you'll see in a lot of the drawings, they put it on their heads. The women cover their knees and elbows. Unless they're in a private room, so in this drawing, you'll see that Tamar, the leading lady, she's in her bedroom by herself, so she's wearing short sleeves and pants, but then when she leaves her room to go do her laundry, she puts on a sweatshirt and a skirt. And the most important thing, because this is a romantic comedy, is that the men and women do not touch. I get asked about my target audience a lot, and people want to know, am I writing this for a Jewish crowd? Am I writing this to educate non-Jewish readers about the Jewish experience? I wrote this book because it's the story that was inside me that I wanted to tell, and because writing about love has meaning and beauty to me. This story does feature Jews who care about their Judaism and observe it, but more than that, this book is a classic romantic comedy about specific characters with a big dance break, cringy, awkward moments, quiet, loving ones, a huge, big fight, and of course, reconciliation. As I said earlier, missing expectations is my big theme and what I spend the book talking about and what my characters have to deal with. Cautiously Pessimistic follows Choni Hart, my male protagonist. Choni for Jews is it's usually a girl's name. It's short for Hannah. It's a biblical name. Some of you might know it as Hannah. That's the English translation. And here, his name is short for a pretty typical Jewish male name, Elchanan. Choni is sincere, sensitive, thoughtful, and more feminine than he's really comfortable with. A few days ago, I was talking about this story to someone. It was my first time talking about it with her, and I realized that it took 10 minutes of talking about the book, which means that she'd continue talking to me about my book for 10 minutes, but it took 10 minutes before I actually used my protagonist's name, which is silly. I know the name. It's more straightforward to talk about people or characters specifically without pronouns, but I wondered why I was resisting using the name, and I realized I'd been doing this for a whole year. And it came to me that I was resisting using his name because Choni resists using his name. Throughout the whole story, he never really becomes comfortable with his femininity, and he never really comes to terms with being called this girl's name. Because he's never comfortable with it, and he never comes to terms with it, I also have never become comfortable or come to terms with it. In many rom-coms, men are written as sensitive and thoughtful and sweet when the leading lady needs them to be, but then as soon as the plot demands, they become idealized macho men. I think a truth that a lot of people are uncomfortable accepting is that a man who can care and listen to you talk about your feelings and watch you cry will also need you to hear his feelings, be overwhelmed by those feelings, and sometimes cry himself. Choni Hart is sensitive and caring, but he also gossips and overanalyzes. He gets embarrassed and cries, and then he cries about being embarrassed. Choni and Tamar meet, and they go out, and they like each other in a way that defies both of their expectations. But as they're falling in love, both get insecure and push the other away. For Choni and Tamar to find love and their happy ending, they don't need to change who they are intrinsically, and they don't need to become okay with things that have bothered them their whole life. All they really have to do, and isn't this easy, all they have to do to earn the happy ending is accept and be honest with themselves and each other about what their expectations were, and be honest and open about their feelings going forward. Thank you so much. Questions?
What was the biggest challenge you faced in staying true to that as you developed your story?
The hardest thing for me writing about the Jewish experience, or really a religious experience, is that people have a hard time, I've found, with hearing a story about religious people where it's not about them leaving religion. I know that in the beginning, a professor was trying to encourage me to write about how negative Jewish dating is, and I can I can fill out until 9 o'clock talking about why Jewish dating is absurd and ridiculous. But I didn't, I think there's also really great things about it too, and it's the community I'm from. So I found that some people wanted me to be writing an expose about how ridiculous the religious experience is. And it took me until actually Anna in last year's class, in our thesis class, we were practicing a pitch, and I had been really confusing in the pitch, and Anna asked me a question. She's like, so are you trying to make your community look good or bad? And yeah, and it made me cry at the time, not because Anna's not nice, but because I really didn't understand the answer. And when I reflected on the question, I thought, I'm not trying to make it look good or bad. I'm trying to be honest about what it is. So once I dropped this necessity to make the community look bad, I could actually get into the characters. So that is, I think, the hardest part about writing a story about religious characters, where religion is not a contentious subject.
Since you decided to work in a specific genre that has so many pre-established tropes, how did that affect the way that you approached your story?
Yeah, so romantic comedies are, it's a genre that I love. This past year, I probably watched a rom-com a week just to keep my head in the game. And yeah, and so I tried to use the tropes because the characters were already kind of new and underused. So I'm like, I'm gonna use the most popular song that's in a rom-com. Do you want to? Whitney Houston's "I Want to Dance with Somebody" is in like 17 rom-coms. I can list 3 easily, like right now. So I wanted to include that song. Like, that's the song that they listen to, because that's the song that Love Simon listens to, and that's the song that's in 500 Days of Summer. And I used a male protagonist because I wanted to like have I wanted Choni Hart to be the leading lady of this book. And I wanted Tamar to have to go to him and like drive on the highway and, be the person who goes to him and apologizes. So I tried using very common tropes and applying my very specific characters to them. Anyone else? We got till 9.
Do you see this translating into movie media? Because rom-coms are typically, you said you watched one a week for the past summer. Is there any way that you'd want this to become a different form of media to reach more people?
Yeah, I would totally love to make this a movie. I already have a soundtrack in mind. Movies are great because they really do reach more people than books. As it happens, romantic comedies or just regular romances are a very flourishing book genre as well. I think in the watching a lot of rom-coms, I'm a much slower reader than I am a watcher because a movie takes as long as it takes. But like I read about a romance book every 2 or 3 weeks to also just to help not get taken out of the genre that I was writing. I'm ready for some mystery books again now that I'm finished for now. But I'd love to make this a movie. I would want to make sure that it's not important to me that the actors be Jewish or that they don't film on Saturdays, but it would be really important to me that the characters who appear on screen are wearing kippahs in every shot, unless they're asleep, in which case you don't really need to wear one. Or I want the women to be covering their elbows and knees, unless they're in their bedroom. So I would want them to adhere to the Jewish laws when if it was turned into a movie, but I think that would be super dope.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned the soundtrack. What are some of the songs for your soundtrack?
Okay, I have a whole list. Shut Up and Dance With Me is on that list. Heartbreak Wreckage is a song that I listened to as I was writing the horrible fight scene. And I just have a whole list. I plan on making a Spotify playlist and putting it on the website. Yeah, music is a huge part of movies, and it's such a big part of this genre that I took songs that I've loved from other rom-coms, but then also just songs that I love in general. What's great about rom-coms is you can have the happy, fun songs and also the, oh my gosh, life is the worst and everyone is pain songs in one movie, because you feel both of those things.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to know about the process of making the illustrations and all that stuff, because you have gotten so good.
Thank you.
So impressive. What was probably the thing that was the most surprising and challenging about this process?
The most challenging part for me was my lack of knowledge. So I did basically everything digitally. I took the reference photos myself. I went to locations. I took the reference photos. I put those reference photos on Procreate, and then I did an underdrawing where I traced them, and then I did an overdrawing to make sure that it didn't look too traced. But I did all of those drawings at 72 DPI, which is too low. So I did 129 drawings at 72 DPI. because I thought that I needed to make it lower DPI to so I could have more layers, which gives me more flexibility to edit, and it turns out that that's horrible. So I had to redraw everything at 300 DPI, which for everybody who's starting their project soon, 300 DPI or nothing. Don't bother if it's lower than that. If you're printing, that's a really big caveat. It looked great on a computer. So I think illustration-wise, it's like my lack of knowledge was something, like I feel like I learned so much information. I think another thing I struggled with was finding models. Like my figure drawing could stand to be improved always. So for when I didn't want to make something up out of my head, I would have to find someone to model. Basically, everybody in the comic is the same body proportions because my roommate did most of the modeling. So everyone is the same size as she is. Yeah, okay. Thank you.